Tonight, Anthony Albanese defends his policy change on the tax cuts. Also, Labor announces its candidate for the Dunstan by-election. Queenslanders brace themselves for Cyclone Kirrily as it approaches the coast. And Australia tears through the West Indies batting lineup in the second test at the Gabba. Good evening, Richard Davies with ABC News South Australia. Anthony Albanese has abandoned key elements of massive tax cuts his government supported since it came to power, instead redirecting them towards millions of workers on low and middle incomes. The Prime Minister's acknowledged the backflip will be controversial, but insists Australians need financial relief and that he has the ticker to do what's right for them. It's triggered angry criticism from the opposition leader, who's accused Mr Albanese of lying and breaking an election promise. Here's political reporter Matthew Doran.
In a hurry to begin the public sales pitch,
you guys get out of the way,
after upending a 5-year-old tax plan he'd inherited and had committed to keeping, just 5 months before it was due to come into force.
When economic circumstances change, the right thing to do is to change economic policy.
We're seeing a political charlatan who's prepared to do or say anything.
The original cuts passed back in 2019 would have left the tax system looking like this from the 1st of July this year. The main change was the removal of an entire tax bracket, meaning everyone earning between $45,000 and $200,000 a year would pay the same rate of tax. Labor's proposal shoves that extra tax bracket back in and it tinkers with the rates and thresholds around it. The lowest rate of tax is cut from 19% to 16%. The second tax rate sits at 30%. The 37% tax rate is the one that's reappeared, but it kicks in at a higher income level than before, of $135,000 a year, and the top tax rate from $190,000 a year. But how that translates to your bank account is the key here. Before, low-income earners weren't going to see anything from the Coalition's Stage 3 tax cuts. Under Labor's proposal, they'll get an extra $800. More cash will continue through those middle income ranges up until $150,000 a year when the tide turns. The tax cuts are still there, they're just not as large for higher income earners as they otherwise would have been.
It's great for the lower income people because obviously you get more back, but at the same time, the higher income, I mean, they worked for their money, so why should they be penalised?
To use arguments like, oh, things have changed is spurious.
Peter Dutton not commenting today on whether he'd repeal the plan if he became Prime Minister, rather wanting to focus on matters of character and credibility for the current PM.
Look at what he says and contrast that with what he actually does, because he's not a truthful person.
I'll tell you what my integrity is. Not looking at low and middle income earners and saying, sorry, I'm just the Prime Minister, I'm not in a position to help you.
The policy pivot will be put to its first electoral test in just over a month, when voters in the outer Melbourne seat of Dunkley go to the polls in a by-election.
I think it's good as long as inflation doesn't go up.
That's great for me and for my family.
But on whether it's a broken promise.
More like a reality check.
The government always changes their mind all the time. I don't really trust what they say regardless, sorry.
The Prime Minister citing Treasury analysis to insist that giving more people more money won't drive inflation even higher.
See you later.
And he's not done yet, promising more cost of living relief in the May budget, while setting the consumer watchdog on the nation's supermarkets to investigate whether customers are being gouged at the checkout. Matthew Doran, ABC News, Canberra.
The unofficial campaign ahead of the Dunstan by-election has begun, with Labor unveiling its candidate for the contest to replace former Premier Stephen Marshall. It could be weeks before the Liberals choose who they put forward. State political reporter Rory McLaren has the story.
Coffee time on the parade.
I'm Pete. Nice to meet you. This is Cressida.
Hi, Jen. Nice to meet you. Nice to
Tell
meet
me
you.
what you're here for.
The Premier with Labor's candidate for the looming Dunstan by-election, Cressida O'Hanlon.
This is her home. She wants to represent her community in the state parliament.
She's twice before contested seats in Adelaide's inner east. Labor will be hoping it's third time lucky following former Premier Stephen Marshall's announcement on Wednesday he'll soon leave politics.
If you want to make a difference, you can't give up. So I didn't lose by much.
260 votes to be precise to Mr Marshall at the 2022 state election. With the government facing continued criticism over its health performance and ramping, it was little surprise the backdrop for the announcement was the new Nord ambulance station.
It is only happening because of Labor's comprehensive plan to rebuild our health system.
I don't trust anything this Premier does. He's all about the selfie in this stage. He can't deliver on ramping.
As for who the Liberal candidate will be to replace Stephen Marshall, nominations close tonight.
We will have a candidate in place in the coming couple of weeks. I can't put a date on it because I don't know the number of candidates and who those people are.
One of those people is expected to be lawyer and former staffer Anna Finizio. Rory McLaren, ABC News.
One of the people who helped expose the Oakden abuse scandal has pleaded guilty to possessing child exploitation material. Stuart Johnston admitted to one count of knowingly being in possession of child exploitation material, which prosecutors allege occurred in Mannum in May last year. In 2017, Johnston, whose mother was a resident at Oakden, was one of several people to raise the alarm about the abuse of residents at the aged care facility in Adelaide's northeast. He became a high-profile campaigner for reform of the aged care sector and even launched his own political party ahead of the 2022 federal election. The 50-year-old will face court again in May. Russia has accused Ukraine of killing 65 of its own prisoners of war by deliberately shooting down a Russian military plane. Moscow says the captured soldiers were being flown to an exchange when the plane crashed in the southern Belgorod region near Ukraine. Kyiv says it wasn't told to secure safe airspace, unlike previous swaps.
A giant fireball near the Russian city of Belgorod. Good God, this woman says. Footage posted on social media showed a plane falling from the sky.
We saw a red fiery object, then we heard an explosion and saw a red flash, and that was it.
We all ran outside in case there was any help needed. It crashed far away, but it was still loud and scary.
The remnants of a Russian military transport plane could be seen scattered across fields near the Ukrainian border. Moscow immediately accused Ukraine of shooting it down with missiles in a terrorist act and said it had been carrying 65 Ukrainian prisoners of war on their way to an exchange.
Instead of this exchange taking place, the Ukrainian side launched an anti-aircraft missile attack on this plane, which became fatal.
3 Russian officers and 6 crew members were also said to be on board. Ukraine did not confirm or deny involvement. Military intelligence said a swap had been due to take place, but that Kyiv was not told to secure its airspace for the transfer.
It's evident the Russians are playing with the lives of Ukrainian prisoners, with the feelings of their families. It's necessary to establish all clear facts, considering the plane crashed on Russian territory.
The Ukrainians are claiming one thing, the Russians are claiming another, and we just don't know enough to comment on it.
In a church near the crash site, a vigil for the Russian servicemen on board. It's unlikely Russia will allow an independent investigation, so the true circumstances of the incident may never be known. Elias Kluwer, ABC News.
North Queenslanders are tonight taking shelter as they brace for the full impact of severe tropical cyclone Kirrily. The latest forecast has the Category 3 system to make landfall just north of Townsville within hours. But the damage is expected to be more widespread as gale force winds batter coastal communities from Innisfail to Mackay.
A raging sea off the North Queensland coast. It's a treacherous playground for adventure seekers, the early symptoms of a looming cyclone.
We can come out about 7:30 this morning for a quick kite, get in well before it gets too windy.
Kirrily is on a rampage. At her core, 165 km/h gusts. Hamilton Islands copped 115 an hour winds, and heavy rain brought early flooding in downtown Bowen.
We could see isolated totals of up to 300 millimetres in a 24-hour period as this system crosses the coast.
Elders have been flown off Palm Island, which doesn't have an evacuation centre.
We're the largest discrete Indigenous community with
with a large population, and we do need one.
The system is due to hit Townsville and surrounds late tonight.
We've distributed more than 20,000 sandbags at the moment.
This afternoon, residents were ordered to seek shelter and lock down.
We're prepared and ready for the worst. Now we wait and hope for the best.
Along the coast, communities spent the day counting down and getting ready. Townsville's most vulnerable have also taken shelter in evacuation centres. It's the barest of basics. Residents and visitors on Magnetic Island, just off the coast of Townsville, have been cut off from the mainland. They've been urged to have enough boiled drinking water to last them 3 days in case of power failures. Across the region, more than 100 schools are closed. In air, locals spent the day preparing, and teams of volunteers have been busy filling sandbags.
It's been outstanding actually for the last 4 or 5 days. You can see by the people here, this has just been non-stop for that whole time.
Some residents have boarded up their homes, just like they've done in previous cyclones.
Oh, I've been set up from the last few, and all we do is put the timber back over windows so we don't break the windows.
Extra police and emergency crews have been deployed. Interstate help is also on its way. A sleepless night ahead. Lily Nothling, ABC News, Townsville.
4 people have died in Victoria's worst drowning in almost 20 years. An enormous rescue effort couldn't save the extended family group, which got caught in a suspected rip at an unpatrolled Phillip Island beach yesterday afternoon.
It's a picturesque stretch of coastline, now the scene of a horrible tragedy that's claimed 4 lives and shocked the local community.
It's very sad, and unfortunately it just does happen. These beautiful beaches, people just don't know the power of the ocean.
It's been almost 20 years since we've seen a single event that's resulted in such a high number of loss of life in Victorian waters.
The group, an extended family from Melbourne's southeast, were visiting Phillip Island yesterday. 4 people waded into the water at Forest Caves Beach before getting swept into a rip. The alarm was raised and a flurry of emergency service vehicles joined off-duty lifeguards surfing nearby in the desperate attempt to save them.
Our crews worked amazingly hard to provide every opportunity to those 4 people.
A 23-year-old man, a 20-year-old woman and a 43-year-old woman visiting from overseas all died at the scene. A second 20-year-old woman was flown to hospital where she later died.
This tragedy has taken the lives of 4 people, and it's fair to say that the impact will be profound on those families.
Police spent the day formally identifying the victims, which are believed to be part of the Indian community. The Indian High Commission has labelled it a heartbreaking tragedy and expressed its deepest condolences to the victims' families. The unpatrolled beach on Phillip Island's south coast is popular with surfers, but that attraction also makes it dangerous.
Tragically, as we found out yesterday and all too often, it is full of rips and hidden dangers.
Only a very, very experienced swimmer should be entering the water to swim in those areas.
Authorities will look at whether there are sufficient warnings in place.
In terms of what further actions need to be taken at that location, I really should wait for that investigation to be concluded.
Lifesaving Victoria is urging people to stick to patrolled beaches and swim between the flags.
As we approach this long weekend, everyone needs to work together to make sure that everyone comes home from the beach at the end of the day.
Police will prepare a report for the coroner. Jessie Thompson, ABC News.
Doctors are reminding South Australians to be careful in the water ahead of the long weekend following a spike in children suffering water-related injuries. So far this summer, 10 children have been treated at the Women's and Children's Hospital, a jump from 4 during the same period last year. Anisha Palarasetti reports.
Finally able to walk again after a boating accident changed this teen's life.
I didn't know what hit me because I was in such shock, and the next thing I knew, I was in the water. I was in absolute pain.
16-year-old Isaac McGare suffered multiple fractures to his pelvis in October when he collided with 2 wooden poles while being towed on an inflatable raft at Mannum. Isaac's case isn't unusual. New data from the Women's and Children's Hospital has found that of all water activities, those involving boats were most likely to cause severe injury. It also found the average age of children with these injuries was 12, and nearly 70% were boys. Doctors are urging parents and kids to take safety measures this summer and to always have a supervising adult.
Look out for the signs that are on the beach and on the river, particularly following the speed limits that are there, and watch out for submerged items.
A message echoed by Sharon Sands after a serious diving accident in 2012 left her then 13-year-old daughter partially paralysed.
We can't reverse these things. Once these things happen, you cannot reverse it.
They're injuries that no parent wants to see their child go through. It results in months of rehabilitation of pain.
An urgent pitch for kids to stay safe. Anisha Pilarasetti, ABC News.
All eyes are on Canberra this evening for the presentation of the Australian of the Year Awards. Evelyn Manfield is outside the event and joins us. Evelyn, many Australians are being honoured tonight.
Hi Richard, there's 4 categories. You've got the local hero, the young and senior Australians of the year, and then the big award tonight, of course, the Australian of the Year. So all the finalists from each of the states and territories are inside now, but they did walk the red carpet a little earlier. Now the finalist from South Australia is Tim Jarvis, and he is really fighting to deal with climate change and biodiversity loss. He says that it's something that humans need to be able to fix. Now, the finalists will be announced, or the winners rather, will be announced progressively from 7:30 Eastern Time. Each of the categories announced one by one, and then really the winners will be put their names and their causes in the national spotlight, just like we've seen with past winners. Of course, there'll be an excellent company. We're talking previous winners like Dylan Alcott, Grace Tame, and last year's Taran Brumfitt.
Evelyn Manfield reporting. Statistics show that most people who leave prison will eventually return, but a new music program for people in jail is trying to help women buck that trend. First Nations singer-songwriter Nancy Bates has been teaching inmates at the Adelaide Women's Prison how to write songs, sing and play the ukulele.
Love is strong, strong enough to get along.
When Fabian Brachel learned how to play an instrument while in an Adelaide jail, it was life-changing for the 34-year-old.
We're learning how to express and finally heal with traumas that we've faced in life.
Miss Brachel was one of 10 women chosen to participate in a music program for inmates at the Adelaide Women's Prison. The program is led by First Nations singer-songwriter Nancy Bates.
Working with this group of women is some of the best creative work that I've ever been part of.
Everyone has managed to find a G. Miss Bates has been teaching prisoners the importance of music and how it can be a powerful tool for healing and redemption. And set my spirit free. The number of female prisoners is increasing at a rate faster than it is for men. And Miss Bates hopes the Songs Inside program can help keep vulnerable women from returning to jail.
And we want people to be coming out of prisons in a much better position than what they entered prison in. And so we need to all care about this space and we all need to invest in this space.
The program has been recognised by the Australia Day Council of South Australia, with the group of current and former prisoners invited to perform alongside the youth orchestra as part of Adelaide's January 26 festivities.
Rather than being seen as an inmate or a criminal or an ex-criminal or ex-addict, to be seen as a musician.
These are women who've made significant decisions to turn their life around.
A second chance they're determined to make the most of. Annabelle Francis, ABC News.
To finance now, and the local share market produced its 5th rise in a row today. Here's Alan Kohler.
The reason the share market went up again today was that the People's Bank of China cut interest rates, which boosted the iron ore price, and that led to solid gains in the share prices of Australia's listed iron ore miners, BHP, Rio Tinto and Fortescue. But there was one nasty prang. Domino's Pizza was sliced 30% after a trading update that said December half earnings would be less than last year because of falling sales in parts of Asia and Europe, especially Japan. Now, the strength of the iron ore price after that Chinese rate cut is in the context of rising commodity prices generally caused by attacks on the shipping in the Red Sea. Iron ore is actually the commodity least affected by this, although more than 10% of the steel trade is being disrupted. But the biggest impact is on fertiliser. The US market also had its fifth rise in a row last night, and share prices in Shanghai and Hong Kong responded to the rate cut with solid gains, and the Aussie dollar was steady against all major currencies. Finally, here's a chart that explains the change to the Stage 3 tax cuts. Now, the vertical axis is percentage of income. Horizontal axis is salary, ranging up to $200,000. Now, the blue line shows how the tax cuts were going to be distributed before today's changes. The more you earned, the more you got. The orange line shows the new distribution. Now, for those on salaries above $60,000 a year, it's basically the same for all. And those earning less than $45,000 now get a tax cut where they wouldn't have before. And that's finance.
A late afternoon fight back from the West Indies has frustrated Australia after its bowlers delivered a dominant opening session on day one of the second test in Brisbane. Mitchell Starc did the damage with the ball, taking his 350th test wicket before the tourists' lower order dug in, taking the score to 5 for 145 a short time ago.
The West Indies won the toss and elected to bat, naming a fourth debutant for the series in the process. Off-spinner Kevin Sinclair, the only change from the first test for either side. There was early excitement when Josh Hazlewood thought he had Craig Braithwaite LBW, but an instantaneous review showed a huge inside edge.
Not a great start for the umpiring side of things.
But after facing 17 consecutive dot balls, Braithwaite wafted at one too many outside off stump.
Hazlewood is relentless.
The paceman quick to shoo away COVID-positive all-rounder Cameron Green, who was left to celebrate by himself. Nathan Lyon was introduced in the 10th over as the run rate stalled. Tajnarayan Chandapal producing some fancy footwork to avoid an embarrassing dismissal to the off-spinner. Kirk McKenzie decided to push the scoring.
Oh, there's some aggression from McKenzie.
But Pat Cummins ended his stay at the crease, gone for 21 after lashing at a wide, bouncing delivery. Chandapal had been offering some resistance, but he couldn't resist a wider one from Mitchell Starc.
Edged and taken, beautifully done.
The left armer then claiming two more quick wickets as he passed the 350 test dismissal mark and closed in on Dennis Lilly on the all-time list. The West Indies needed an injection of life, and Joshua Da Silva tried to provide it as the tourists found some fight in the late afternoon sun. Tom Wildey, ABC News.
Brisbane is celebrating after winning its second Big Bash title. Dominant performances from opening batter Josh Brown and speedster Spencer Johnson led the Heat to victory against the Sydney Sixers.
This was a moment to savour for Brisbane and its fans.
Straight down the ground, catch taken. Brisbane silence the SCG. They bring the Heat.
Brisbane had been the form setter all season and brought it home with another dominant bowling display.
It's definitely really special. The boys with the ball have been incredible all year. To defend that with ease was really special for them.
Bowled him. Has the answer as Johnson chops on.
Spencer Johnson has been a revelation for the last 2 years, and his 4 wickets was rewarded, named man of the match.
I owe the Brisbane Heat everything. Coming up here last year, didn't know where my career was going, and now I've just won a Big Bash with 11 of my closest mates.
So often catches win matches, and how the Sixers were rude, dropping in-form opener Josh Brown on just 3. He took full advantage in a quick-fire 50.
Fielder charges in the rope, watches it fly over the head. 2 6 in a row for Brown.
No such let-offs when the Heat was in the field.
It's Nisa of all people, gets it back to Paul Walter. He's so good, Michael Nisa.
Sydney could never get its innings going, falling 54 runs short. It left Brisbane with plenty of reasons to celebrate. Job done. Matthew Smith, ABC News.
Alexander Zverev has produced his best tennis since recovering from injury, upsetting Carlos Alcaraz at the Australian Open. Last night, the German's 6th seed stunned the Spaniard in 4 sets. His win sets up a semi-final clash tomorrow night with Russian Daniil Medvedev.
Alexander Zverev had never beaten a top 5 player at a Grand Slam.
Oh, he's done it.
But his victory over world number 2 Carlos Alcaraz is one of his finest performances and comes 18 months after a painful ankle injury.
I was kind of on top of my game before the injury happened. You know, I'm obviously extremely happy to be back where I am and winning these kind of matches.
Zverev was aggressive from the outset.
And he needs the one. Wonderful display from the German.
He bludgeoned his way through the first 2 sets and was a break-up in the third before the Spaniard roared back.
You just never know.
And despite some bandaged toes, the German recovered to put the Spanish star away in 4 sets.
I'm sad with my level today because I've been playing good tennis, you know, the round before, this one with a lot of confidence.
Zverev's tournament has been overshadowed by allegations of domestic violence against a former girlfriend, claims he denies. The case is set for trial in Germany this year. Scrutiny will only grow if Zverev reaches the final. His next opponent is Daniil Medvedev.
He's obviously extremely difficult to play, there's no question about it.
An Australian is through to the men's doubles final. Matt Ebden and partner Rowan Bapana celebrated like the Special Ks after winning their semi-final in 3 sets. At 43, Bapana recently became the oldest player to reach number 1 in doubles.
I think this grey hair didn't come pretty easy, you know.
But an Australian won't feature in the women's doubles final after Storm Hunter and Katerina Siniakova lost in 3 sets. Tom Maddox, ABC News, Melbourne Park.
Northern white rhinos were once found across Africa. Now they're on the cusp of extinction, almost wiped out by illegal poaching. But there's hope for the future after scientists performed the first successful embryo transfer in its closely related southern species.
Najin and Fatu. This mother and daughter are the only 2 northern white rhinos left in the world. They live closely guarded on a reserve in Kenya. Now a fertility breakthrough may offer a way to save the species. Using a procedure on a closely related subspecies, scientists have successfully transferred the embryo of a southern white rhino into a surrogate mother.
It is really a great milestone to achieve the first successful embryo transfer in the rhino. It's very challenging in terms of placing an embryo inside of the reproductive tract, which is almost 2 meters inside of the animal.
The next step is to replicate this and produce northern white rhino calves. The last male died in 2018, but 30 precious embryos are being stored in a lab in Germany. Najin and Fatu aren't capable of carrying a calf to term, so the embryos will be implanted into a southern white rhino surrogate.
But with this new technology, we see that we have a really fair chance to achieve this, the first pregnancy of this magnificent species in this year.
It's a race against time to make the impossible possible before these northern rhinos are gone forever. Joni Jones, ABC News.
To the weather now, and tonight's photo was taken at Office Beach in Wallaroo and sent to us by Gail Peters. Plenty of showers across Adelaide today, with nearly 35 millimetres of rain since 9 a.m, making it the wettest January day in nearly 50 years. It reached a top of 25.2 at 11 o'clock after an overnight low of 21.1. A cloud band brought showers, rain and isolated thunderstorms over the west and south, while hot conditions continued in the northern parts of the state. It reached 40 degrees in Woomera, 20 in Port Lincoln. Thick cloud over northeast Queensland is bringing rain, storms and gales with tropical cyclone Kirrily, while other cloud with a monsoon trough and low is generating heavy showers and some storms to the top end. Around the country tomorrow, showers in Cairns with 35 degrees, 33 for Brisbane and a rainy 22 in Melbourne. Closer to home, isolated showers and thunderstorms are expected to move north. It'll reach 33 degrees in Coober Pedy and Roxby Downs. Further south, a chance of isolated light showers about coastal districts, a top of 24 for Keith, 22 in Mount Gambier. A severe weather warning is in place for damaging winds in parts of the Flinders, northeast and northwest pastoral districts, and there's a strong wind warning for the Spencer Gulf. Partly cloudy in the city again tomorrow. We're heading for a top of 24 degrees, down to 16 overnight. On the waters, west to southwesterly winds to 15 knots, tending south to southwesterly to 20 knots in the early afternoon. Seas increasing to 1.5 metres north of Brighton. Sunrise just before 6:30 and sunset about 8:30. Looking ahead, partly cloudy on Sunday with 28, a top of 32 Monday and a sunny 31 for this time next week. And that is the latest from the Adelaide newsroom. Thanks very much for your company. Stay with us. Up next is the Australian of the Year Awards. Good night.